Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we uncover the leadership life hacks that help you to experience breakout performance faster and rocket to success. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion. Today I'm excited. We're just going to have a really focused discussion on some of the things that we need to do from a both practices and principles and behavior perspective with somebody who I just love his work because he really makes things and provides more clarity, which is actually one of the things that we'll talk about. And Lee, this is actually the second time he's been on the show.
Yeah,
that doesn't happen in the fast leader world. We only have a few select people that are part of repeat because there are so many great voices and perspectives to hear, but I'm really excited to have Lee on the show. Lee, welcome. So Lee Colan was born in Long Island, New York. And when Lee was 7 years old, the family moved to Fort Lauderdale, which he says it's also known as the southern tip of Long Island. Lee's parents tried for a second child for 12 years and finally had his older sister. How did that come out? Wait a minute. They tried for a second child for 12 years and then finally had his older sister. Oh, so then Lee came 3 years later. That was the big surprise. So his sister and his 3 years older women. So his sister is 3 years older and his brother is 15 years older. Both parents were part of the greatest generation with roots from Italy and Turkey. Colan is short for Colan.
Correct.
All right. So youth sports and school leadership roles triggered Lee's thirst to learn more about leading people. He always seemed to be coaching and helping others be their best, and this continued with leadership roles in college at Florida State University. While Lee was entering his doctorate in organizational psychology, his passion for people and leadership accelerated as he served in executive leadership roles. This enabled him to apply the science of human behavior in the world of work. These roles also gave him the opportunity to help his team members grow both personally and professionally. In addition to his corporate leadership jobs, Lee also worked with 2 premier consulting firms and knew he wanted to build his own firm at some point. And that happened on January 12th, 1999, when he co-founded the L Group with his wife, Julie. It's a leadership advisory firm dedicated to healthy growth for the leader, the employees, and the business. Lee likes to say, our lives were meant to give away. Our lives were meant to give away. So he believes in living your legacy instead of worrying about leaving it. So he strives to serve each day, serve his family, his friends, his clients, the community, and most importantly, strangers. He lives in the Dallas area and has been married for 35 years to Julie, who is also co-founder of their firm and co-author of 8 of Lee's 16 books. And the book that we're going to be focusing in on today is called Healthy Leadership, How to Thrive in the New World of Work. And it also has actionable guides for leaders. So they actually have 3 grown children who also have written a book on parenting from a child's perspective. And they now work for TikTok, Procter & Gamble, and Kraft & Heinz. Lee, Colan, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
Totally. I'm here with you, bud. Thanks for having me, Jim.
Hey, I'm glad you're here. And I really enjoyed going through this book. And, for me, one of the actual, practices that you talk about is, clarity. And your work just helps to bring that to this confusing world of leadership. But, and here's the thing I also found interesting is that you state in our ultra competitive marketplace, good results aren't good enough. Can you please explain and elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think today we have to have great results, but more importantly, it's how you get those results. So it's great if we drive, even if we create great results. But if we're burning people out, if we're not respecting them. So I think clearly the pendulum has shifted much more toward being employee-centered. So, the things that used to set leaders apart that were great leaders 10 years ago, now are just like table stakes. Like you just got to do that stuff. So I think it's our leadership approach and how we develop the relationships, how we connect with people, how we connect them to a greater sense of purpose and meaning in their work. The how of leadership has become really almost more important than the what, like getting the results. Now, listen, we live in, I don't want to be Pollyanna about it. We live in an and both world. We have to get results and great relationships and great leadership along the way. But just driving at the result without understanding how you get there and bringing the people along the way with you and creating a great place to work. And it's challenging now. I mean, that's really critical. It's challenging. It's more, geographically dispersed. People are remote. And so it puts more of an onus on the leader. But that's the part that really sets the great leaders and companies apart today.
I'd also love to get your perspective, because to me, it also seems like and I don't want to say quality, but I would say the characteristics and attributes and experiences of the worker in the workplace today is significantly more immature than it was in the past. Mm-hmm. I mean, while they are exposed to more information, it doesn't mean that they have been developed in regards to their emotional intelligence, collaborative work environments. And so I think when you talk about, ultra competitiveness and then therefore ultra complexity, I think we have to do some things that are much more basic than we've had to do before in order to bring people along. Am I false in that assumption?
I think that's true, and I think particularly for the brand new workforce that has come in through just pre-COVID and into COVID, they've had many fewer data points. Think about your first time on the job, right? You're there, you're watching your boss. What does he or she do? What's appropriate? What's not appropriate? You're getting feedback along the way. You're kind of getting polished up like a little diamond very quickly. Like you're getting kind of a quick MBA in that first year or two of your work. Now fast forward and think, if I spent all that time at home, which no fault of anybody, but it's just how it was. I mean, how many data points am I able to collect on a Zoom call, right? How many times am I bumping into somebody and just hearing what's going on in the office, how things work around here? How many times has someone just informally grabbed me, hey, Lee, this is how we do things around here. Or Lee, my first time on the job, Lee, we don't wear gray suits to the office. I remember that back in the day. Right? So, all hundreds of those data points per day, then multiply that times 5 days a week, times 2 years. That's just a lot of polishing and feedback and refinement of your social and emotional cues that this newest work of generational workers just didn't get. So we really have to be attuned to that now and make sure we're still pouring into them to kind of bring them back up to speed. It's my perspective, and our clients are feeling that also.
Well, and even as you say that, I mean, talking to other folks who are in that, more mature space, oftentimes in a middle or a little bit more of a senior role, they're finding themselves having to take on significantly more burden, because of the, let's just call it learning curve that you kind of really were talking about being so lacking. And they're like, this is burning me out. I'm having to do things that that I needed, that I did maybe 15 years ago, because if I don't, it's not getting done. Right.
And that's just a reality. Again, no fault of anybody, but particularly it's been exacerbated. And people could say, well, it was occurring pre-COVID, but just like any good crisis, it accelerates an existing trend, and it really exaggerated it. So it is just a reality now. So you see, listen, I think we all have more grace now when we go out to the restaurants or anywhere. Like we know that, the wait staff's brand new. They're trying to figure stuff out. They're scrambling to get people. They only have half the restaurant open because they don't have enough people. So in the same thing in the corporate world, like most people are scrambling to get reasonably qualified people. And in some cases, they're not qualified. So we just have to kind of be patient, have grace, and invest in those folks. And who bears the burden of that is the folks that are a little more seasoned, that have to kind of pass down their knowledge. That's just a reality. Now, I do want to say, in fairness, I'm a big believer in reverse mentoring too. So I think it's important for like the more seasoned generation to think, okay, maybe there are different ways of doing things also. Maybe this new generation coming in understands how to do things a little bit differently, with a little more savvy that I wasn't really exposed to. So I always like when I see organizations where learning is going both directions. But the instance you're talking about is primarily kind of downward mentoring and coaching.
Well, I mean, as you were talking, I've been having a lot of conversation here lately about status quo bias and confirmation bias, and when you apply that to leadership, it just totally plays out in a lot of ways. Well, this is what happened when I was coming up.
Right.
It's like, well, wait a minute.
Right. And the unspoken thing is that really relevant now? But
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, oftentimes, and I know you're a person of strong faith, we talk about things that, have happened in scripture. And it's like, we always have to remember that was like 2000 plus years ago. Let's put that in perspective, right?
Yeah.
Then how do you roll that forward? What does it look like and translate into today's world?
Right.
And the same thing applies in our smaller life window. Well, that applied when I was, in my 30s, but now I'm in my 50s, and there's this whole different application that takes place.
And just like a biblical truth, I believe truth is truth no matter when, right? It's timely yet timeless, but the application of that truth can look very different. So back when I was on the job 2 years ago, we did it this way. Well, the approach there might be some truth in the approach, but we have to get to the nugget of that and say, okay, that's really a good approach. There's something in that nugget, and it worked then, but how do we need to tweak that to make sure it still feels relevant in today's world?
Well, and so that leads us to making sure that we're doing a good job of perspective taking from what we're looking at from a measurement perspective, and of both effectiveness as well as efficiency. And you introduced something called the measurement continuum,
right,
where leadership is a leading indicator and past performance is a lagging indicator to help leaders understand their impact. So, Can you help us understand how we need to reframe our thinking to know how we should be measuring our leadership performance?
Sure. So I believe in just taking a balanced view. So if anyone out there is familiar with the balanced scorecard, it's really an extension of that. So if you picture kind of 5 columns, so in the first column, you have financial metrics, right? Very important in any business, but that end of the continuum is the most lagging. It's a picture of the past. Then you get into your customer metrics. Then you have process metrics, your quality, your reviews, things of that sort. Then you have employee metrics. We've just added another column, which we believe is the most leading indicator. That's a picture of the future, which is your leadership metrics. So if you think about, if you're just looking at your financial metrics over here, in essence, you're looking at your wake, like what happened already, right? But if you focus on your leadership metrics, that's going to give you a picture of what's going to happen in your organization 3, 6, 9, 12, 24, 36 months down the road. Basically looking at the horizon, right? Now, I'm not saying ignore financial. We're not that naive, but the view here is take a balanced view. Most organizations, particularly if they're growing, maybe you're an entrepreneur, like you're focused on those financial metrics, like got to drive those metrics, but you're really not driving the financials. To get financial metrics, you have to make sure you're taking care of your customers, and then make sure your processes are efficient in delivering to the customers, and then making sure your people that are delivering those and executing those processes are well taken care of, and then ultimately making sure the leaders that are leading those people are preparing and equipping and encouraging those people to execute those processes that support the customers that lead to the financial metrics. So we really have a whole chain there. So it's a little bit of illusion when we think, I just got to manage the financial metrics. Really, you have to take a balanced view, but you really ought to be primarily focused on your leadership and your employee metrics. That's what's going to drive the future of your business. If you could do that well, your financial metrics end up taking care of themselves. But if you're just focused on we've had plenty of clients call us in and say, hey, Lee, we've had record financials for the past 5 years. I kept hearing this mantra as I would go in, and they wanted me to do an organizational assessment of their growth. So that's great. So I went in there and I found out their quality metrics were going way down. And this is a drug company. And so I was getting ready to deliver my report to say, you better be careful because all your leading indicators are going down. They weren't investing in their people, their quality, their process metrics weren't so hot. I said, you be careful because sooner or later this is going to affect your financial metrics. Sure enough, I'm on my way there. I got a call on my cell phone saying, Lee, you don't have to show up. The FDA just called, and we had to take our primary product off the shelf, took 40% of our revenue, boom. And they just found out what I was going to tell them. So you could think you're pushing it off, but it's really just how business works. So we just, as leaders of an organization, we need to, again, a balanced view, but make sure we're focusing on the employee and the leadership metrics that give us the most leading indicator of what's going to happen in our business in the future.
So their problem is they called you too late.
Yes, exactly. Good news is they had great leadership. They heard it and they took action. They got it squared away. But that's a big hurt you could have avoided, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that you say that. I mean, because for us, and I like the way you put it. And for me, I kind of reframed it a little bit and said we need to learn how to read our wake.
That's very good. Yeah, yeah.
Because if you start thinking about the amount of power we apply, if you start thinking about, do we turn left, turn right?
Yeah.
We need to do a better job of looking at our wake. Okay, so
it's funny.
Go ahead.
It's funny you say that, because we always talk about, as a leader, you need to leave behind you great results and great relationships, and we call that the leadership wake. And so it has to be both of them. And you have to have an even wake in your path. So I like that.
Definitely. Okay. So now to support our leadership performance improvement, you introduced those 3 principles and 3 practices. Mm-hmm. And again, we'll talk about this in a second, because I'm like, is this all there is? But anyway, what are these 3 leadership principles and practices?
Yeah. So we have a very simple model. I'm a simple-minded guy. We like to take leadership challenges and just find what's a simple path to get through it and to help people execute it, because we believe that the complexity just gets in the way of execution. So simplicity clears the path between an idea or a concept and how I can execute it. So there's no rocket science in this model, but there's a lot of science supporting it. And you'll see that in the book. So we have 3 principles and 3 practices. So the 3 principles of healthy leadership are love, positivity, and growth. And we define them as love is doing what's in the best interest of others. That's it. It's not about, agape love and that kind of thing. It's just doing what's putting others first. Right. And positivity is managing negative emotions and increasing your positive emotions. That's it. Our minds are wired to have a natural negative bias. So it's understanding your mind and that bias to make sure you're bringing positivity for yourself, but then how you can reflect that out for the team. And that's probably the section of the book that has the most science behind it, yet it probably feels the most positivity, like, woo, put a smile on your face. There's really great science now and really great tools people could use to make sure, listen, I always say the game of life is the game of inches. It's 1 to 6 inches between your ears. If you really understand how to manage your mind, boy, you're a powerful force. And the third one is growth. And that's just kind of seeking new insights, skills, and knowledge. So those are kind of like we call the operating system, if you will, that you don't always maybe talk about love, positivity, and growth, but it's a mindset of how you approach those things for yourself and others that kind of sets the foundation for these practices to be able to be executed well.
As you're talking, so one of the it's been a while since we chatted. It's been a couple of years since you were on the show last, and in that time frame, I became certified as a baseball pitching coach, and I coach at the varsity level. And what I found myself needing to do is focus more on that whole mental side that you're talking about. And so when you start talking about positivity, and so in addition, I became certified as a mental performance coach, and awesome. To me, it's amazing how much opportunity exists if we focus in on the positivity piece, and just kind of flip things around. And even when you start talking about, like, for example, we all have that small inner voice, right? And it's talking to us all the time. And the problem for us is that when we let that little voice start crossing our lips and it has a negative connotation or context to it, or damning, whether it's self or others, we start heading down a path very quickly. And we have to be more cognitively aware of that and just stop it and be proactive with it. Right. So how much work do you actually do? Because one of the things that my mentor and that mental performance coach certification had talked about is they started actually looking at and have been getting more requests in the professional community to apply what they have essentially built their base off of, which is in the sport and athletic community.
Yeah. Yeah. So was your question, how much do we do in that community?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not much. We don't really work in that realm. Would love to. We just don't have it. We're mostly in the corporate realm, and listen, executives running Fortune 500 companies have a lot of responsibility, and it could be the old saying, it's lonely at the top. Like, they need someone to kind of help them. We use a phrase in one of our books about on mindset. It says, if you're in a bad state of mind, treat your mind like a bad neighborhood. Don't go in there alone, right? So they sometimes need someone to kind of help with that. So like this positivity is not just about your positive thoughts, but it's also about your emotions. There's interesting research that'll show that like negative emotions literally restrict our periphery. But not only, so think about the last time you were really upset, enraged at somebody, or really feeling overwhelmed. Those are negative emotions. And with that, our periphery narrows in, but also our problem solving skills narrow, right? So like, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I don't know what I'm gonna do. How am I gonna get out of this? That's how people get in horrible states of mind that even potentially lead to people taking their own lives, you know? So to the extent that we could literally breathe, get some perspective, and start bringing in more positive emotions, literally, physiologically, our peripheral vision broadens out. And with that, cognitively, our capability to see different options. Oh, okay, it's overwhelming, but if I just take this step, I could do this. Or if I look at it differently, I could do that. It opens up our problem-solving capabilities. So that's huge when you talk about people, CEOs running through COVID or having, significant supply chain issues or downturns in economy. It's really easy to start going, oh no, the sky's falling. And what happens with that negative emotion? Them and the rest of the team start panicking, and their decision making starts going like this. So if we understand that in our mind, and we have the tools in the book to help have them step back and broaden out. It's called the broaden and build theory. That all of a sudden their problem solving starts opening up. That's huge. That's huge impact for, I don't care if you're a pitcher or a CEO, like to be able to step back and create that. So that's the kind of stuff that's in that chapter. It's not just kind of Pollyanna stuff. You're familiar with the science behind this. But I think it's very powerful for people. We believe this book will help people thrive in their personal life and in business, because these fundamental principles of love, positivity, and growth, who doesn't need more of that if they execute them well with their family, personally, and certainly in business?
Well, and you hit on it. So I think I posed the question incorrectly. What I was meaning was, of your work, how much do you spend in it in regards to mental performance, not you actually working in the world of sport?
Oh, I'm sorry, my bad.
No, that was my fault. I need to do a better job of clarity on that.
All good. A lot of it. We always say leadership's an inside job. It starts from the inside out. So it's your mind and your heart. Like, is your heart in the right place, which is what love is? Is your head in the right place, which is the positivity? And are your skills in the right place? That's what growth is about. So it's really getting all those in balance before you even think about, what do I need to go tell my team to do? So it's the way we say, you got to get your own mind right before you get your team right. So that's kind of our starting point in any situation. Even if someone says, oh, I act together, I just need to have them do something, we always kind of reground them and say, let's make sure that we have the right mindset, the right skill set, and the right kind of heart set, if you will, before we start figuring out how we're going to lead well.
Oh, that's good. Okay, so all right, now our 3 key leadership principles again were love, positivity, and growth. And then our 3 leadership practices. What are those, and some highlights with that?
Yes. So the first, they're all 3 C's: to clarify, connect, and coach. Right, and they're pretty self-explanatory. Right. I think the number one thing people want from leaders, that we call these the 2 C's: clarity and confidence. I want to know that I know what I'm doing in my job. I know where we're going. I know what the vision is. I know how I connect to something bigger than myself, right? And my leader presents that with confidence and instills confidence in me to do that. So those are key. So clarify. By clarifying, you do all that. You create confidence for yourself and your team. So we're talking about clarifying your vision, your expectations, your values. Those are all things that we want clarity around. We don't want muddiness around, like, oh, well, how are we supposed to do things around here? What's really important to the business? What's my role? We don't want any muddiness. All that lack of clarity or ambiguity. We always say ambiguity is the Achilles heel to accountability, right? When we have that ambiguity, it's like, okay, what am I accountable for? I start swirling and stuff. We don't want any of that. We want clear expectations, a clear vision, clear values. So the other C is to connect. So we want to connect people with something bigger than themselves, a sense of meaning and purpose, right? We want to connect them with each other as a team. So feel like, okay, we're shoulder to shoulder. Even if I'm remote, I've got my team, they've got my back. I'm bigger than something than myself. And as a leader, I want to make sure I'm connecting with the person's sense of contribution. So in other words, am I appreciating them for what they're bringing to the table, right? So those are all kind of different levels of connection we want to bring. So we have clarify, connect, and then obviously the last one is to coach. And for years, the sports world has always known that the greatest athletes in the world all have a coach. For whatever reason, it took decades later for the corporate world to figure out the best leaders are always best served by having a coach also. 25 years ago, it was considered a scarlet A to have a coach. Oh, he's got a coach, that kind of thing. Now it's like everyone's screaming for a coach, and because they see there's science behind it. So a couple key things here under coaching. We want to make sure we're coaching for strengths to build mastery. Interesting research will show that strengths-based coaching, Jim, yields a 36% improvement in performance, where weakness-based coaching yields a 26% decrease in performance. That's a 60% spread. I'm not saying ignore the weaknesses, but where you focus your coaching. So people, particularly today's worker, they want to deal with more strengths than their weaknesses. I love the quote by Marcus Buckingham. He says, our job is not to put in what God left out as a leader. Our job is to draw out what God put in. That means identifying the natural gifts of your team and figuring out ways they can flourish and thrive within those gifts. That's a key thing within coaching.
Well, I mean, a lot of these things, defy going back to that whole element about who's coming into the workplace and even who's been in the workplace. We've been conditioned for, 100+ years in a Prussian school system that's all about, negative focus.
That's right. I mean, and there's great currency in the work world to identify a problem and fix it, right? And so as a leader, that's great. But also that has been translated over the years to, if I'm working with Jim, what are Jim's weaknesses? How do we improve those weaknesses, right? Versus me saying, man, what's he really naturally gifted at? How do I help with that? Not that I don't want to ignore your weaknesses, but in most cases, I can invest tons of time and energy into trying to improve your weaknesses. And in most cases, I'll probably get it up to an acceptable level. But rarely am I going to turn your weakness into a natural gift. But my return for my invested time is much greater if I figure out your naturally gifted areas and figure out ways to help you flourish within those areas.
It's really interesting you say that, because oftentimes what we will find, and if we look at our life experiences, and if we look at people who've accomplished certain things and are standout and extraordinary for themselves, they've actually done that. They have taken what was a weakness, and they've therefore applied so much effort and all of the elements to it, and then therefore it became a strength. How does that work?
Yeah, I think, listen, with enough effort, I'm not like a predeterminist, right? So with enough effort, we could take a weakness and get really, really good at it. I'm just saying, for the return for your invested time, God gave us all certain natural gifts. I could be great with people or numbers or analyzing things or presenting or selling or creating, whatever that is. I mean, just in terms of having a sense of meaning and purpose, if we can help people flourish within that area, that just serves them and the organization much better. That's all. I'm not saying to ignore the weaknesses. People can, if you put enough time and effort. I've had things I'm weak on. I work at it. That's great. But in a practical matter, people want to feel like they're really contributing and they're getting to work in a place that's helping them flourish. A key is to be able to find those gifted areas and helping them flourish within them.
Well, you also mentioned something about coach, and I almost feel that, for those of us who have reached a certain point and have learned a lot of things, that quite frankly, it's part of our obligation to coach others, to be that coach. So I think, and you even kind of mentioned it in the book, I think in certain ways it's where this goes back to, is that we need to keep filling our well in order to be able to fill other people's well.
That's right.
So we may have our own coach who's helping to fill us, but then we need to actually take out and fill others. So does that fit within your coach principle?
Yes, absolutely. Listen, we never want our team to feel like we've arrived, right? They have to see that we're pouring into ourselves, we're investing in ourselves, we're always learning and stuff. But then that's got to trickle down, right? I mean, the best leaders and the research we talk about at the beginning of the book that shows the current workforce and what's important to them, that they want to coach more than a boss, right? They want a purpose more than a paycheck. They want to focus on their development, i.e. their strengths, more than satisfaction. Those are key things. So they want that coach. So whether or not it's your instincts or not, your team is clamoring for it. This new generation of worker, we have to deliver that. But I just think there's a higher moral responsibility to say, I've been given the opportunities to learn some things and make some mistakes and get some bruises and have some success. I mean, my meaning in my life as a leader ought to be, how do I prepare the next generation? How do I help them, be as successful, hopefully more successful than I was?
You say that. So I actually have a call center coach, a blended learning leadership academy for people who are in customer service for the front line, as well as support and sales. And we had a group of people that were leaders within a particular organization. And one of the folks who was enrolled, into the program, asked of their leader the question, well, do I have to do it? What kind of response do we give to a person who is in a leader role, frontline leader role, who essentially says, if I don't have to fill my well, I'm not filling my well?
Yeah. And I would just say, you're going to have a limit on your own growth and satisfaction in your life. This is in the growth section of the book, we all crave kind of novelty and opportunities to grow and master new things. So if someone's feeling just like they don't have the energy or the desire or the motivation to do that, they're going to limit their own growth, I would say, within the organization. But also, that's not the kind of example we need for our team. So again, I mentioned before, like, you never want your team to say, like, oh, he's arrived, so he can just kind of coast there. So I'd say that's a really important, in this case, a negative example you'd be setting for the team. So I would say you got to do that. If you want to lead, that's part of leading. We always say leaders are learners, right? And so, listen, I'm not Pollyanna enough to think that everyone's going to just jump on that. But if I'm managing that person, I'm not saying it's not an option. Like, you've got to be stretching and learning. If you're not learning and you're just stuck in that whatever current mindset that you're in now, and the company starts growing and our people start growing, the last thing you want is them to start outpacing your thinking and your capabilities. That's a risk we can't take. The leader always has to be at the forefront of that.
Okay, so you talk about some of the things in regards to these principles and these practices now being essentially basic requirements versus what it used to be.
Right.
Help us understand that.
Yeah, sure. So the fundamental change that is really just supply and demand, truthfully. You've never, in our lifetimes, Jim, we've never seen the workforce be so worker or employee centric, right? They've got the leverage now, supply and demand. We don't have enough of them. 10 years ago, you could have done these things and that we talk about in healthy leadership, and you would have set yourself apart as like this great, progressive, really cool leader that was getting great results and having great relationships, a win for everybody. But today, it's just not even an option. If people don't see healthy leadership, the things we're talking about today, they're just going to look for it elsewhere. So you could say, I'm going to dig my heels in, I'm an old school guy or gal, or I just don't agree with this stuff. Well, then I would say good luck to you, because people are going to read that really quickly. If you're not providing that sense of purpose and that coaching and that development that the new generation is looking for, they're just going to go elsewhere. And guess what? There are plenty of other places that offer it. So it's really just become a competitive issue now. If you want to compete, if you want your organization to be competitive, if you want to have stability on your team and a sense of cohesiveness on your team to deliver great results and relationships, it's not an option anymore. Right? It's really just a supply and demand issue. And most experts will tell you that we don't see this shifting anytime soon. There's still many more jobs than there are workers. So there's going to be this still talent war that you're going to have to fight to get people. And once you get them, you better lead really well in healthy ways to be able to keep them, because that churn's expensive.
It's interesting you talk about that gap and we talk about the need and for many, many years in certain skilled areas, they've talked about both a worker as well as a leader crisis. Like for me, I think, 15 years ago, they were talking about nursing being a problem, right?
Oh, huge, yeah.
And it's just continuing to, continuing to grow into multiple different, types of areas and industries. And there's a whole lot of reasons for all of this. But I think the most important thing that we have to look back upon is, like, and you said it a moment ago, is that we have to understand self before we start, knowing a direction that we need to take. And in the book, you offer up a healthy leadership checkup, and it's available on your website, and we'll make sure that we have a link to that on your show notes page. It's made up of 18 questions. to help the taker, and it's a self-assessment, to identify the best starting point to begin their journey toward healthy employee and business growth. But when I reviewed it, I started looking at this and I'm like, okay, it's a self-assessment. And even in the beginning, it says, you state something to the effect of, okay, you got to be honest with yourself.
Right.
But we can be honest in what our own mind is. But so for me, I'm like, okay, well, I think we should probably also have our workers take this, so that they can, so we can understand what their perception is on those things. Am I wrong in thinking that?
You're absolutely right. And you were probably in my office the other day thinking about this, because in most of our other assessments, we have a 180-degree version. So what you're seeing there on the website is just a free beta version of that. And so ultimately, we'll have a version that people could take as a leader, and then have up to 20 of their employees take it, so they can compare their self-perception with the perception of their team and really kind of get a more realistic view of where are the gaps, where are we in alignment. And we believe that kind of insight's really key. We always say the best kind of knowledge is self-knowledge. So right now we're just starting with the self-assessment, but the 180 will be a much meatier version of that to kind of say, okay, here's where I need to improve.
Well, and listen up, Fast Leader Legion. I mean, because of Lee's prolific work efforts, it's highly likely that by the time you're actually listening or watching this particular episode, that it will be available. Okay, so Lee, I do the self-assessment. I even, have some of my people taken to get some of that 360 view stuff. But so now I get look and I get visibility. Then what do I do? Yeah.
Well, then you got to take action, right? Listen, nothing happens without taking action, right? So it's great that you've taken that first step at that point and maybe read the book and done some self-assessment and looked at what I needed to do. But the first thing I would say is take a baby step. Sometimes we do that. We kind of feel, oh, I got to work on this and this and this and this. Like, focus on one area. Focus is critical when you're trying to create change. The only sustainable change is the kind that's like happens a little bit at a time. You turn something into a habit. When you create a habit, you don't have to think about it anymore. Then and only then you should go, let me work on something else now and bring that in. You know the old saying, first we form our habits, then our habits form us, right? So I would say find one thing that you're kind of excited about, like, hey, that's a gap I have, but I think I could get my hands around that one. Work on it, put a system in place, a new process in place, use one of the tools we talk about in the book, create a habit out of that. Then it's like, oh, this is just the way I do things. I'm in a groove now, that's great. Then go chip away at the next one. That's how you create sustainable personal change that's layered on you, that's more more effective, frankly. I think sometimes people get excited, they read a book or do something and they try to do 10 different things and we don't do any of them well. So just chip away at one thing at a time. That's all.
Well, then when I start thinking about this and I start looking at these 3 leadership principles and these 3 leadership practices, and I take the self-assessment, and maybe, I'm sure there's a couple things that I have to be looking at in regards to where they fall. Right. How do I prioritize? This should come first because it has more weight and impact than something else. How does that work?
I would say if there's a weakness in one of the principles, I'd always start there, because that's kind of your foundation, right? Love, positivity, that's kind of your mindset, your skill set, your heart set there. So I would always focus on those over the practices, which are, I think, important, but really, again, leadership's an inside job. So it's really making sure we've got everything going on right here, our head, our hearts, and our skills. If having to choose, I would focus on the principles first.
Got it. Okay, so
pick one of them.
So we're talking about 16 books, sitting here, and I start thinking, okay, well, how many more is left in Lee? I start thinking about that. I start thinking about because you have everything from a situation where you talk about adherence, you talk about all these different things. Here we're talking about healthy leadership. I'm like, well, what's a goal for Lee Colan?
Yeah, we just want to equip and encourage leaders. We consider our business a personal calling, a ministry, if you will. So the topics we just don't pull out of the air. They're things we work with our clients, that they're challenges they've had. We try to help them with it. And the books are simply ways for us to codify those solutions we've put in place so that others can have the benefit of seeing what's been successful with our other clients. So I don't have a goal in mind. I wrote an article 20 years ago that was about 1,000-word article, and a friend said, "Hey, Lee, why don't you turn that into a book?" I'm like, "Tim, that's like 1,000 words. That's all I got, dude. Right. So I never had an idea of like I'd be writing books. So, so we don't really have a goal. It's just whatever challenges start coming up that we see, we try to help our clients address those challenges. If it happens to turn into a book, that's great. If not, that's fine too. So for now, we really like Healthy Leadership because it brings together all of our training, our years of experience, and really what's happening in a very real way in the workforce now. And we also feel like it's transparent enough and transferable enough that it will help people elevate and thrive in their personal lives, which is really important to us, not just in their business lives. So we hope to be kind of working with Healthy Leadership for quite a while here.
I mean, for me, as you were just talking, I'm like, okay, so actually your goal is to make sure that you're meeting the needs of today in order to have the success of tomorrow.
There you go. Perfect. Thank you.
Sounds good. And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Lee, the Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, but your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Lee Colan, are you ready to hoe down?
I'm ready.
All right. So what, what is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
I would say just more self-awareness, like continuing to dig in to myself and figure out what are my barriers. What's holding me back most today is the thing that I don't know about, the barrier that I don't know about. So I have to keep digging and figuring out what those are. And
what is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
From a graduate school professor that said, Lee, your job in life or as a leader is not to know everything, but it's to be able to fill in your ignorance within 24 hours. And that was a long time ago. So now it'd be 8 hours. So the lesson was be resourceful as a leader. You don't have to know everything, but you have to know how to fill it in.
And what would be one of your best tools that you feel helps you lead in business and life?
You know, it's the simplest thing in the world. It's an accountability tool, but it also helps people focus. It's the 3W tool. It's a simple Word document of what, who, and when. Okay, guys, we come out of a meeting or an interaction. What has to happen? Who has to do it? By when? It provides clarity, alignment, and accountability right off the bat, whether it's for myself or for the team.
And what would be one book you'd recommend to our Legion? It could be from any genre. Of course, we're going to put a link to Healthy Leadership on your show notes page as well.
Sure. A classic book by a guy named Og Mandino years ago named The Greatest Salesman in the World. And there's just great life lessons in there. And it's not really so much about selling, but Og Mandino, The Greatest Salesman of the World would be mine.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net and doing a search for Lee Colan, and that's Colan. Okay, Lee, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you've been given the opportunity to take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you to the age of 25, but you can't take it all. You can only take one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you and why?
I would take a deeper sense of faith in myself and my Lord back with me that I've developed over the years to know that everything works out great. Life's not always smooth and easy, but that peace that comes with knowing that if you're serving the right people, and you sow enough seeds, good things come back to you.
Lee, I've had a great time chatting with you today. No surprise to me because we've done it once before. But if you could, please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you.
Yeah, you can go to leadershipexperts.com. Our website's there. There are a lot of free tools, the self-assessment that Jim alluded to, blog posts, videos, all kinds of free stuff out there. So leadershipexperts.com would be the place to go.
And Lee Colan, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom and helping us all get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.